back to Cinematic. I'm Ryan, and I'm feeling okay. Didn't do an episode last week, wasn't feeling great. I think you can kind of still hear it in me, but feeling great, so no worries there. Still gonna do the movie I said that I was going to do, which is Tiger Cage 2. And when I said it was quite possibly another franchise that Yen Wuping and Donnie Yen entered somewhat after the fact, like in the Line of Duty 4, I was wrong. They had also done Tiger Cage 1. So this is nothing new except for the fact that the actors that did come back are all playing different roles. So it's still not really a sequel in anything but name, which, you know, they did. That just means that Tiger Cage 1 did well. So they were like, well, no matter what we do next, it's Tiger Cage 2. We'll just call it that at the very least. It is also produced by D&B Films, like in the Line of Duty 4 was, which I don't think I mentioned this back then, but that was one of Sammo Hung's production companies, which he had a few. I think D&B was the one he fired up when he ran into some... Oh, there was one movie in particular. No, I'm sorry. So the Boho Film Company, which was Sammo Hung, was one that he fired up after Raymond Chow had pulled one of his movies after just 2 weeks. Doesn't say actually which one it was here, but the first one that he did under Boho Film Company was Encounters of the Spooky Kind in 1980, so might be able to do the math there. D&B was one that he fired up in 1983 with Dixon Poon and John Shum, who was one of the, I believe the activist member of the Lucky Stars troupe. Yes, that was him. So I don't know why I'm talking about this other than Sammo Hung is connected to this, and why would I not mention that? But also because if you do hear me make continued reference to In the Line of Duty 4, those comparisons aren't completely unwarranted. And there are a couple cameos as well, one of which is probably more than a cameo, but the way it plays out just kind of feels like a glorified one at that. Also, Donnie plays a cop. Again, he's a retired cop in this one. Actually, you know what? Before, okay, we've talked about Donnie a few times, and it's not like we're not going to talk about him for this movie also. But can I talk about Robin Shou first, or Robin Shou? I'm going to go with Shou because it sounds more Hollywood, and for him that seems fitting, not just because he actually came into martial arts comparatively late in life, certainly compared to Donnie Yen, who was, you know, like a youngster. But Robin Shou was literally close to Hollywood in that he was attending USC when he saw Shaolin Temple, which was our episode 15, which sounds nuts at this point, but Jet Li's debut movie that came out in 1982. And Robin Shou, if that's when he truly picked up martial arts, became International Forms Champion in that same year. So they've either got the wrong Shaolin Temple. There was one in 76 directed by Cheng Che, starring Alexander Fusheng, maybe, that he saw. Shou was born, I think, in 60, so it would, you know, line up. But if Jet Li's Shaolin Temple is the one we're talking about, he apparently made a quick study of martial arts, becoming International Forms Champion in 82 and 83, won a bunch of gold and silver medals in China as well, and then became Grand Champion in California, and then would shortly after start stunting and acting in Hong Kong, which he's a Hong Kong native, so he was just, you know, world-wise, let's say. In fact, Michael Woods, who we're going to talk about, had something to say about that. And yes, Robin Shou is Liu Kang from the Mortal Kombat movie. Obviously, that's how I know about him at all. In this movie, he plays a man by the name of Wei's Chow, who's kind of an evil accountant that's laundering money for the mob. I think they do actually mention the triads, or at least the subtitles do at one point. But he's got like a suitcase full of money and everything. You know, is there anything better in a movie, especially for a bad guy, than just a suitcase full of money? Well, he's got that. And he just happens to be doing business in the same building where Donnie is. Donnie's business being signing the divorce papers from his wife because she never understood the job, man. And boy, does it take off from there. It's kind of one of those whirlwind beginnings. If I can even recount this to you. Robin Shou goes from like a dinner party to this scene where he's, laundering the money through there's some US bad guys as well who we'll get to. When some other bad guys arrive to get the suitcase, Donnie Yen runs into all of this while it's happening. Shootout ensues, followed by a car chase. And I believe one of the bloody gangsters from Robin Show's side ends up getting in the divorce attorney's car. But in the kerfuffle, she remembers Donnie Yen and ends up fingering him to the police and being like, he's one of the bad guys. So Donnie Yen gets picked up. But then when the bad guys show up to get, it's Rosamund Khan who plays the divorce lawyer who's now a witness. So they're trying to get her. But for some reason, I forget, I think Donnie, it's like the witness is under the blanket is all they know as the ambulance is going back. So they accidentally kidnap Donnie Yen instead. And now you're like 10 minutes into the movie. So a lot's going on. And this is also when Cynthia Khan enters the movie, who is kind of the cameo, one of the biggest cameos, if not the biggest cameo that I'm talking about here, in that she also plays a cop, in fact. And she was, if you remember, in The Line of Duty 4 and several of those movies, she plays kind of the titular girl with a gun. Speaking of the girls with guns genre that those movies are a part of, which they call out like immediately. Like she's on screen for like less than a minute, probably less than 30 seconds when somebody yes madams her like very quickly. So I'm like going back to Wikipedia, like, oh, is this one of the unofficial or official sequels even of that franchise-ish of movies? No, it's not. It's just D&B cross promotion, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, madam.
But that's just icing. The main thrust of the movie is about Donnie Yen and Rosamund Kwan, who, I think I said Khan earlier. It is Rosamund Kwan and Cynthia Khan in this movie. But the movie is largely about Donnie Yen and her relationship, because Donnie Yen's a dirtbag. Like, he follows her back to her friend's apartment and like barges in, I think just to give her a piece of his mind after she tells the cops that he was involved with the thing. But in that apartment, her friend has already been murdered by the actual murderer, and then Cynthia Khan shows up and thinks they did it, and that's the movie. Like, they're on the run, they've been wrongfully accused. But it's a comedy for the most part, certainly. It's not like super wacky, this is like probably medium wacky, I think, at this point. Actually, you know what? I'll tell you the wackiest thing about this right off the bat is the product placement, which is new to me in these films. I guess it's about the right time when this was, the 90s. It was, by the time Wayne's World came out and could make fun of it, it was certainly a thing. I don't remember seeing it in any of the movies I've done so far, so I don't know how common it was in Hong Kong action. But there's a moment where the movie just lingers on a bottle of hot sauce, like silently lingers, and just long enough that you're like, is something happening? Like, is somebody gonna burst through the wall or something? At this point, no, it's just get a good long look at this. But that's not even the egregious one. There's one later on where they come together to eat, and I forget who it even is at this point, but one of them has the line between Donnie Yen and Rosamund Kwan that alcohol makes me happy, they say. And then again, the movie goes silent while they take two big swigs of Foster's beer, just front and center. So I'm not even like, product placement, whatever, get paid. There's certainly a wrong way to do it. And when the movie stops for, like, I can't think of any other reason why it does. There's somewhere, somehow, some contract was like this amount of screen time for this, and here's your check or whatever. And there's other ways to do that can even boost or add to the legitimacy of a film. Although, is it ever not distracting? I don't know. But in this movie, it's a little wacky because the movie pretty much stops for it. In fact, that might be a good way to describe. I'll just stick with maybe the negativities for a second about this thing. The movie kind of stops for everything. It feels like when it's time for Donnie and Rosamund to come together. They stop and have their moment and do a little bit of that work, and then it's on to the action stuff. So it's just, it all adds to it feeling a little herky-jerky, maybe disjointed at worst, and it can end up feeling like a lot of filler. Like this isn't something new. I'm not going to sit here and be like, they did this weird thing where they're talking about one thing, but then they spend 5 to 10 minutes on another out of nowhere. Like, obviously that's not new. And to some extent I've adapted. And I think where I've liked that the most is when those digressions are compelling within their own right, or funny, or at least charming. Like you can always key into some charm, even if you don't get the joke or there's something lost in translation. For the most part, you can be like, okay, I get why that's at the very least charming. There's not as much of that for me, and we're getting pretty subjective at this point, in this movie. So, for instance, there's a bit where in between, I couldn't tell you what 2 scenes, Donnie's just walking down an alley and gets some trash, like a wet bag of garbage thrown on top of him from a window above that he can't quite see, and gets all whoop, whoop, whoop. Then some beat cops show up, so he hides from them because he's still on the run, and he hides in a wet barrel of trash. So he's stinky, and that's kind of the joke for at least another 5 minutes. Is when he reconnects with everybody, they're like PU, and that's, I guess he's supposed to be a little bit of a sad sack, so maybe that works out in a way, but it just, for whatever reason, in this one at this point, ends up being a little less compelling. Few of them are totally fine. Like Cynthia Kahn's stuff is really great. She comes back pretty much just long enough to figure out who the real killer is, and then it becomes a absolute yes madam movie for 5 to 10 minutes, where she chases down the real killer gets killed by another killer, so she gets to close the loop where she kills the killer of the other killer, and then she's out of the movie. That's why I say kind of a glorified cameo, maybe at best. And then there's a really cool fight scene on the top of a double-decker bus where Donnie's, kicking people off the top onto cars below and kicking them through the windshields on the first floor. And we're still in the era where when I say that, it's people actually doing that. So lots of cool stuff there. So plenty to appreciate, even if, kind of like in The Line of Duty 4, I found myself unable to connect with it in certain moments, which I would still say, looking back on In the Line of Duty 4, even by the time I was recording that episode, I was like, okay, I think it's coming together a little bit more for me, and I'm appreciating it a little bit more as I talk about it. Kind of happens with all of these. I would say I liked In the Line of Duty 4 better than Tiger Cage 2 overall. At this point, there's going to be some heavy caveats here towards the last 30 minutes of the movie, quite possibly. And I think the movie knows that, because it pretty much wraps up all this stuff, like the whole money MacGuffin, and like nobody knows what happened to it. It falls down the elevator shaft at the very beginning, so it's pretty much Robin Shaw has a partner in crime that kind of has a conscience, and when he finds out that Donnie and Rosamund don't have the briefcase, even though the police want them for it, he kind of makes a friendship with them, and they're all kind of trying to figure out how to sew this thing up. And it even becomes a bit of a love triangle, but they find that suitcase and basically go out and party with it. Kind of Dumb and Dumber style. That's just who I am. I can't help but think of that movie where they spend the whole movie spending that. It's one of the reasons I love that movie, actually, is because I feel like every other movie, when the good guys find that $1 million, they're not able to keep it at the end. Whereas Dumb and Dumber, they've already spent it. It's just, what a fantastic movie. They do that with the money here for a little bit. They go out and they have a party, and they kind of love triangle their way throughout a karaoke bar of sorts. And that pretty much gets tied up, and it's on to the last 30 minutes of this movie, which are outstanding. So Keith Vitale is back, who we talked about in The Line of Duty 4 as well. He even gets some lines in this one. He plays one of those US drug dealers that's helping launder the money. But when his sword fight pops off against Donnie Yen in the third act, I'm basically like, oh, this is why I keep hearing about this film. Like, this is it right now. And it is one of the best top 3, again, I'm early on here, weapons fights I think I've ever seen. So that's maybe the one you YouTube. Also back for this movie, though, and I'm so glad, is Michael Woods, who I mentioned real quick up top, because like pretty much when I switched off the camera for In the Line of Duty 4, I was like, I forgot to talk about Michael Wood's fight on the rooftop in the Line of Duty 4. He kind of has this rooftop brawl where he goes ham and just bulldozes Donnie for like 10 minutes straight. And he kind of gets to do it again here. So I looked him up, and his story is actually pretty similar to John Salvidi's in that, although it was way more of a coin flip. So apparently he was in Providence at the time, went into town, to Boston, I believe, because he had wanted to sign up with this, I think, Taekwondo instructor at the time. I didn't recognize the name, but went to the place and it was closed. So he's like, let's go into town and get some food then. Went to a restaurant, and across the street, he saw some martial arts going on through the window, so just went and signed up there instead. And it was Bo Sin Mok's dojo, like the Donnie Yen's mom. So that's where he began to train with John Salvidi, with Donnie Yen. So it's almost this de facto Donnie Yen stunt team. It was technically the Yuen clan, this being a Yen Whooping movie, but the fact that Donnie was able to bring these guys along that he had been training with since he was at least, 12 or 13. And I want to say, he was still pretty young, but I think he was at least in his 20s at this point. But tell me that didn't have something to do with the quality of these things, and certainly with the quality of Keith Vitale's fight, but also with Michael Wood's fight. And I guess he says that he didn't know what he was getting into. Tiger Cage was his first movie. And after that, didn't want to get into it anymore. But Donnie Yen kept having him back, and he kept showing up. And I'm so glad he did, because he turns out some of these fantastic fights. He says by Tiger Cage 2, he had been around the block a little bit. He had been living in Hong Kong long enough now that he didn't need a translator as much. And that's where actually Robin Cho came in, who spoke English, having already been overseas going to school and stuff like that. So when Tiger Cage 2 came along, he actually, speaking of Michael Woods, had some input as to the choreography and whatnot. He says that's why you'll see some like wrestling type moves in this one, because that's what he was into at the time. So I'll link the video where I got most of this down in the show notes. But one of the other things you'll see in that video, now who's going on a digression, I should talk, right? He only did I think 3 more movies. Again, Donnie kept having him back and he kept showing up. But eventually this got to Blade 2, which, if you'll remember, Donnie Yen was in and criminally underutilized in that movie. Well, turns out that wasn't going to be the case. They got Donnie, and he came over under the auspices that his character would be in that movie a lot more than it was. And I guess when he found out a lot of his scenes were getting cut, which still, why would you? Blade 2 is a great movie, so whatever. He said that Donnie was under so much stress because of that, or in addition to that they kind of had a falling out on that movie. And he doesn't really speak ill of him. He talks about how stressed out he was because of that situation. But Michael Woods still ended up on camera. I think he's uncredited in the movie. And if you look at his uncredit on IMDb, it says that he was the Moscow vampire attacking Blade. So did I go through and comb through, do the hard work of watching Blade 2 again to find a 2-second clip of Michael Woods? Quite possibly. I sure did. Or I'm completely wrong, because again, his uncredit says Moscow vampire, but this was the only clip I could find in Prague, thank you, where it seems like that might be Michael Woods there. So again, I kind of like going down the rabbit hole with some of these henchmen, like where did they come from and how did they hire them and all that stuff. And Michael Woods did not disappoint. So either way, I'm burying the lead. This is not the thing I'm most excited about when it comes to this movie. The fight I'm most excited about, the Keith Vitale one, is the best fight, but the one I'm most excited about is Robin Cho versus Donnie Yen. I knew Robin Cho came from Hong Kong action. I didn't know he went toe to toe with Donnie Yen and pulled it off, however you want to put that, stands toe to toe. He's basically the bad guy for the entire movie. So there's also plenty of scenes of him just standing there and being menacing and delivering his lines he'll just as soon kill you for whatever. So he's a great big bad. He's a good heavy as far as that goes. But to also see him again toe-to-toe in the martial arts sequences was beyond delightful. Not that I don't still enjoy and will in the future. Seems like Mortal Kombat is looming large. I feel like we keep, that's just me, that's, all things, it's all roads to Mortal Kombat at this point. But to see him have a great fight versus Donnie Yen is just fantastic. And again, if this is, this movie came out in 1990, if this is still just 8 years into his martial arts, okay, I guess 8 years is a long time, but still, to go toe-to-toe with Donnie Yen is I don't care how long you've been training. And he does it, and it's great. And yes, he might be part of the final 30 minutes of this movie that's much better than the first 60, in my opinion, but it doesn't make this thing any less watchable. Tiger Cage 2. So that's this week. If you come back next week, and again, no guarantees on this one, I'm comfortable saying at this point, you might hear me talk about, American Ninja 4. Will it make the cut finally? Famously having cut 1, 2, and 3 so far. So failing that, it could be, so we've got another question mark with The Perfect Weapon, which I've done an entire, 40 minutes on with good friend Matt Amberg over on Book Club for Movies, the show I had before this one where I talked about movies. So I might have a solve for that one as well, depending. So come back next week for another good one. That's all I will promise at this point. Stick around for, Tetris Tuesdays at 10, on Tuesdays at 10. Another episode of Chasers every Wednesday at 8 a.m. And then, I sprinkle some other things here and there along the way. I think I'm this close to a Patreon post where I go behind the scenes a little bit. So watch out for some of that. And if, that interests you at all, you'll want to sign up over there at patreon.com/Ryan_runs_ or PayPal, or, any other way that you can help out, liking and subscribing. It's all appreciated. You don't have to be one of these people that you see in a second here, but I love them a little bit more.